Gary Ownbey.
Yep.
You are here by popular demand.
Well, we'll see how it goes. You may be moving me out of here, but I understand that you're.
Yeah, my Ownbey's wife, Ownbey.
That's the way I spell it.
Are you from Cleveland?
Yes, but my relatives are all out of the Smokies, like all the.
Well, that's what they were. Yeah.
Dad said back in those days up there, before his granddad was one of the last generations who lived there before the park opened. They ran everybody out. There was Ownbeys and Ogles and Partons and Trenhams, Huskies and Whaleys, Reagans, and one more I can't think of. But you were basically kin to everybody up there. Dad said you had to marry a cousin back in those days, you couldn't get married. Well, and Ownbey is a very rare name outside of this area. There's a bunch of them around here in Cleveland, and in Dalton, there's a lot of them down there. But
well, I'm related. I'm related to the ones in Dalton.
Well, we're all kin, no matter how we spell our name, with an E, without an E, or two
Were they from Ireland?
Actually, from England. And we did a family. I had an aunt who did a family tree tracing us back to my 8th great granddad, that far back into the 1600s, and she said that we came from England. And I did the Ancestry 23 thing where you do the swab and send it in, and it came back 97.5% English, and then a little bit of Norwegian, a little bit of Basque, which is Spanish, and then a little bit of something else. But and she determined at that time, and I've got the book at home that she wrote, and it has all of our great granddads and all their kids and down to my generation. Now it's another generation beyond mine. And she said we came from a place in England called Oadby, O-A-D-B-Y. That's where the name Ownbey derived from.
In England. In
England. And so we were in London about 4 years ago, my wife and I was in this visitor center just killing some time. And I think their royal family thing over there is sort of a farcical thing, but I made a mistake on my mouth to one of the ladies who was working there about this lady, this Queen of England. Man, don't you spend a lot of money? Oh, sir, we love the Queen lady. We love her. And I said, okay, that's good. So I struck up a different conversation. I said, my name is Ownbey, and I hear that our folks come from a place called Oadby. Do you know of a place called Oadby, O-A-D-B-Y? Spelled it out for me here in England. No, there's no place like that around here, sir. And so another lady, she gets on the keyboard. She's typing away. Well, by Jove, there's a village called Oadby just northwest of here, about 60 kilometers from here. You'd have to have a day car to get there, sir. I said, well, I don't have time to go there, but I just wanted to see if my aunt knew what she was talking about. And apparently she did. So apparently, and then in her book, she's got all the different spellings of Ownbey, and like an O-N-B-Y, Ownbey, with an E, and she's got it with an S. She's got about 10 or 12 different spellings of Ownbey. So I tell people who say, are you kin to so-and-so? His name's Ownbey. Yeah, I'm kin to him, I don't care what you say. And they migrated from there, started out in Alabama, according to Ancestry.com, and then they somehow got into the Smokies and into North Carolina, and just across the mountain in North Carolina from the Smokies.
I thought most of them came in through Maine and hit the Appalachia and came that way.
Well, they may have come down that way because they probably come into the north part of the country and migrated.
But Alabama would be.
My ancestry thing shows that basically a lot of them started in Alabama. I'm not saying how close.
Reckon there's a lot of Ownbeys in Alabama?
I'd say there probably are. And, we're kin, here in town, the Frasers and the Montgomerys and the Ogles and the Ownbeys, the Whaleys, we're all kin, related, blood kin, actually. Dolly Parton, there's the other family I was trying to think of. She's a cousin of ours. Not real close, and don't expect to get free pass with Dollywood or anything off of that. But her dad, I traced it back. It's on. I can call it up on the computer and show you, but it's.
So who are your parents?
My parents were Malin and Louise, and Dad was one of 12 people who actually spelled Ownbey with an E, and his other 11 siblings didn't put an E in Ownbey.
Where were they live at?
Dad was born down on Cohutta Creek, where the Ownbeys and the Whaleys were all down there.
And the Ogles, I believe.
And the Ogles down there. My grandmother was an Ogle, who came out of the Smokies, and my dad, of course, his dad was James Wesley Ownbey, who is my granddad, who came from his dad and parents came from the Smokies, and they moved to Chattanooga. All of my dad's relatives were actually here in Cleveland, and he had a couple of sisters that moved to New York when they turned 18. My Aunt Myrtle and my Aunt Bee, and they moved to New York, and one of them married a Norwegian, and one of the other married an Irish Catholic, and so they lived there and raised their kids there. Then they retired and moved down here, but the rest of them all stayed in this general area. But Mom and Dad, we lived over on Big Springs Avenue, which is 14th Street now. And back in our young days, we went to Big Springs Elementary School, and you might remember Big Springs Elementary.
Don't remember.
It was over there where the Justice Center was built on Johnson Boulevard, which is now the Youth Justice Center.
Yeah.
And it was one of those. Back then, we didn't have pre-school. We didn't have kindergarten, nothing like that. We had 1 through 8, went to the same school, in one classroom, the same teacher all day long. And we went to Big Springs Elementary over there. And then
What era was this?
that's back in the 50s into the 60s, and then it burned. Some kids set it on fire. Some school-age kids set it on fire back.
Not any Ownbeys.
No, I hope not. I hope they used an English. But somehow it burned, and they ended up sending them to some to Oak Grove and some back to the old Templeton Hill. Remember where Templeton Hill used to be by the fire department?
Yeah.
Some of the kids had to go there temporarily to finish out the school year, I guess that was. So then they didn't rebuild Big Springs.
Well, my grandfather lived over there off 1st Street.
Okay.
Roy Ownbey.
Roy.
You ever hear that name?
I've heard the name. Yeah, I know a lot of these, and people come up to me all the time. Do you know this? Well,
Joe Ownbey?
Yeah.
That's my uncle.
Okay.
That's my mother's brother.
Okay. Well, my uncles and my dad.
So how would you be related to Joe?
I would have to go back and look. I don't know.
That you don't know.
Branch kin, I guess we
Yeah,
call it.
yeah.
Not real close.
Yeah.
Not first cousin or anything of that nature. Probably distant 3rd or 4th cousin, maybe something like that.
It'd have to be.
You know, Wad
4th,
Ownbey, down on Spring Place Road, and all that group of Ownbeys. They
Tommy Ownbey.
down there.
There's the Tim and Tony Ownbey.
Tim and Tony Ownbey,
Yeah.
I know the twins.
The
yeah,
twins.
I know them.
And they got an older brother named Tommy.
Yeah.
Tommy's a good friend of mine.
Well, Tony and I sat down one day down at Capitol Tire and tried to figure out how we were related.
Yeah. Did you know Tommy much?
No.
Well, that was their he's very unique.
Yeah.
I really like Tommy. He's real smart.
Well, it's like I said, Ownbeys around here.
Could you and Tim and Tony figure out how y'all were related?
We got close to the point where we knew we were cousins. We couldn't figure out his dad. I didn't know his dad at all. I knew the name, but I didn't know that. He didn't know my dad's name.
And there's a Rural Ownbey.
Yes. Now that was my dad's first cousin.
Is that right?
Yeah. I remember that.
Well,
Wad Ownbey, who's down.
I know
Spring
Joe always talked about being distant related to Rural Ownbey.
Yeah. Well, that was my dad's. I don't know if I ever met the man. But,
You favor Ownbeys.
Well, I don't know.
You know,
about
light
that,
skin and.
We were basically. I don't think we was ran out, but they came out of the Sugarlands area up there. That's where most of them were at. And here's what's crazy now. We've got these Call Me Hillbilly books at home about stories from the Smokies, and it has family trees and names and pictures that this lady, her name is Trenum, put together. And we're up there at the Sugarlands Visitor Center one day, just stopping in for a visit, pick up a book, and here's pictures of some of my relatives and my wife's relatives in the same book. She came from the Trenum line. Her grandfather was a Trenum, and they got ran out of the Smokies when the park opened. They made them leave, and he died about 15, 20 years ago. Moved down here, and actually met his wife down here in Cleveland, but she had been ran out too. He didn't know her up there, but they moved down here and they met in Cleveland, got married, and had a bunch of kids.
Wonder why
Trenum.
Cleveland?
I
Because a
don't
lot
know.
of them ended up here.
That's a good question. I don't know. I've never asked her, never thought about that, but that's I don't know. But obviously a bunch of them moved down here.
A bunch of them moved here.
And
yeah.
the Ogles the same way, and the Trenums.
Me and you're both here.
Huskies and Whaleys and all that. There's
I grew up at Union Grove Church of Christ, and the Huskies went there, the Whaleys, the Ogles, and the Ownbeys, and the Randolphs. I don't know if they're related somehow.
Yeah. I don't know of any Randolphs I'm directly kin to, but I'm sure there are a few.
But it's relations are strange. We may be mad at somebody that's our 4th cousin.
Yeah, they were used to somebody mad at me about something.
So how did you get into this sports thing? I'll have to confess, I'm not big on sports. So what you do is you'll be explaining to me what you do, because I'm not familiar, but you are here by popular demand.
Well, that's good, I guess. Life leads you in strange ways sometimes. You don't know what's coming down the pike. And how that began, my adventure in the world of sports, is Corky Whitlock. I was on there for 50-something years, 53 years, I believe, and he was the voice for everything sports-related in Bradley County. As a matter of fact, WBAC, which was just an AM at the time, was known as the sports voice of Cleveland and Bradley County. he came on here in '61, and the first year he came here, and that summer, that fall, Bradley boys football won the state championship. That spring, Bradley boys and girls both won state championships in basketball. So we had the triple crown. It's never been done before, never been done since. That one school won all three major sports events in the same year.
Which was what? Baseball?
Basketball and football. Boys and girls basketball and football. And Corky, I remember talking years later, he said, boy, I thought this was a can of corn here, a piece of cake. I mean, we win 3 state titles my first year here. I mean, wow, how much better can it get?
Yeah.
But he was working football and basketball. He had different partners back then. And in the 91, I got a phone call at home. And that's when I had landlines, real telephones, I call them, landlines. And my phone rang, and I didn't have caller ID or anything at that time. And he said, is this Gary Ownbey? I said, yes, it is. He said, this is Corky Whitlock. I'm like, what in the world is he calling me for? Well, he says, I want to ask you something. I want you to answer me right now. I want you to think about this before you ever answer me. He said, my basketball partner, Bob Hanshaw, a lot of people know Bob Hanshaw, it was in law enforcement. He's retired, but he was in law enforcement at the time, and he had been promoted to a position of supervisory position, but he had to go to second shift. He said, I'm needing somebody to work with me on the broadcast, not be on the air, really, just comment a few things, and would you be willing to help me? But don't answer it now. Just think about it. Talk to your wife about that, because it would be several, 2 nights a week usually for 3 or 4 months.
Why call you? What were you doing at the
time?
time?
Well, I asked him later. I said, why did you call me? He said, well, I had seen you at all the Bradley games, and I was a photographer. I love shooting photography. I was taking pictures at the games and everything, on the sidelines or in the gym and all that. He said, I could see you had a passion for Bradley sports.
Why taking the pictures? Just that was your hobby?
Yeah, and I'd take them and develop and give them to kids, at players. I've got thousands of them still at home, thousands of them literally at home. And that's back when it was film. My wife said, boy, you spend a lot of money on getting this process. I don't care, leave me alone. It's my hobby, And so I talked to my wife about it, and she said, well, I know you love to do something like that, because I thought about that from time to time hearing him on the radio, and I said, boy, that'd be a neat job to have. And I called him back a day or two later.
Did you know him?
No, I didn't know him. I didn't know he knew me from Adam's House Cat,
You're just doing your thing.
I heard him on the radio.
What we was talking about earlier, just doing your thing.
Doing my thing, my little hobby there. And I called him, I said, Corky, I said, I don't know why he asked me. And he never did say at the time, but he told me later on, he said, I just knew you had a passion for doing that and for high school sports. And I'd like to invite you to come on the air. I said, I won't ask you to say a whole lot, but so you can help keep me some stats for me and things like that. So I basically started out as his stat man there. And then after I've been with him 3 or 4 years, and he said, do you think you'd like to do some play-by-play? And I said, oh, man, would I? That'd be great. Well, everybody thinks they can do play-by-play, I guess. So what I'd do, I'd go home and turn the TV sound off, and I'd pretend, to broadcast a game at home by myself in the basement. I wouldn't let my wife down there. I didn't want her to hear me. I want to try to do this on my own. And I went back after a while and told Corky, well, I've done a few games, for myself at home. I said, I don't know what it's going to sound like. And he said, well, we'll let you try it sometime. Well, he never did bring it up again until we were playing. It's a Bradley-Cleveland game of all games.
Well, now, what year would this have been?
This was in 93, probably 93, 94. And he said, we went to halftime break. He said, after halftime, I want you to do play-by-play when we come back. And I'm just frogs in my throat. And I think, holy smoke, I'm going to really mess this thing up. So I did it, and we were doing really good. And, boy, I nailed it. I just absolutely nailed it, I thought. So we get through, the game's over, we're breaking down equipment, and he says, we need to talk. Corky Loki, we need to talk.
Yeah.
He said, I love your enthusiasm. He says, here's some things you should do and shouldn't do.
Like what was the things?
Well, you got to get rid of things like that and not use filler words, Be smart enough to think of a word to say rather than use a filler word where you don't know, or just don't say anything. Silence is better than saying something like all the time,
Yeah.
And things like that. So I worked on that and got better at it. I hope I don't do that at all anymore. I've tried over the years to make sure I don't say it. And that's why I tell people that have asked me, how'd you get into radio announcing? I said, well, I got a lucky break. Well, everybody, and especially young kids, think I can be an announcer. If Gary can do it, anybody can do it, Well, it probably can. It's not rocket science, but one of the things that made me proud to be on there is I over the years, I always wanted to come to the radio broadcast with something that you're not going to hear or read anywhere unless you hear me on the radio or something like that, And I found out real quick like that, you better know what you're saying on the radio. And don't say it unless you know it's a fact. And here's a perfect example. We were doing a broadcast at Bradley one night, basketball game, don't know who it was. couple of nights later, a couple of games later, we were doing a game, not doing a broadcast, but I'm at a game at East Ridge High School. I remember exactly where it was. And I'm just sitting in the stands watching the game, and these guys in front of me are talking back and forth, and I'm overhearing part of their conversation, and they get in this argument. So-and-so did this, so-and-so did that. He said, no, I heard Gary on the radio, and Gary said this, and they did this. And I said, oh, okay, well, Gary said that's got to be true. And I thought right then, you better know what you're talking about, because you can't unring the bell, as they say sometimes, And so I stayed with that and got involved with football probably 20 years ago. Earl Rowan's been doing football for over 40 years. And so I became sort of the third guy in that party, the broadcast. And I really wasn't on the radio a whole lot then, doing the scoreboard and stuff like that for Corky and Earl, keeping up with those. And then it's just me and Corky on basketball. And I always enjoyed digging into the historical things about a game. If it's Bradley Cleveland or Bradley McMinn County, long-time rivalries, because I kept asking Corky or people, said, well, what have we done against this team? What have we done, especially in the postseason? We go play teams out of this area, or they come here. Have we ever played this team? Well, nobody knew. So that's what got me interested in doing historical things, and I'd bring that to the games, and talk about, well, here's our history against this team. And now every game I do, basketball or football, I can tell you every game these teams have played and tell you what the series records are and things of that nature. And that's what got me into writing the books that I did on basketball first, and it came out in 2015, and then football in 2016, which was the 100th anniversary of Bradley football. And I brought a copy of those tonight that I'll leave here with you. But and the person who got me really fired up to do that was Chuck Clark at Bradley, who's the boys basketball coach. He was an assistant basketball coach to Kent Smith at the time. And I kept showing him these amazing things I dug up. He said, man, I didn't know that. I said, this is great stuff. And I'd give it to him, and I'd talk to Corky about it. I said, where'd you get this stuff? I said, well, it takes some digging to find it, but I'd find it. And I enjoyed putting that out there, because that's the things I want to have on the radio that you would not know that you're going to read in the paper, because the paper are not going to take time to dig this
And that's
out.
sort of filler.
Yeah, it's good to have that, and you come on the air and talk about that. We've played this team 100 times.
You say,
yeah,
we played them in 19 so-and-so, and they beat us, but we didn't beat them.
Yep, and I've got the notes there with me on football broadcasts or on basketball broadcasts, so anytime I need to pick something up, like even the pregame or halftime, we'll talk about
trivia.
Yep, trivia stuff, yeah. And Chuck said, man, you need to write a book. Well, I was working full-time at the time. I didn't have time to write no book. And
where was you working full-time?
I was working at the time at Life Bridges. My career started out let's go back to my education a second. Went to Big Springs and went to Bradley High School, the old Bradley, on Coy Street, which is now Coy Middle School. So Big Springs and Bradley, as I knew it, both those schools are non-existent, the buildings are gone. Right. And my mother, who went to Bradley and graduated, I think, in 42, and our whole family has been Bradley people, except for one grandson, who's my daughter-in-law, who teaches in Polk County School System, had him go over there, and he went to Polk County High School. But when I graduated Bradley, I'd already enrolled, been accepted at Cleveland State. Just going to take basic courses, English, math, and whatever, not knowing what I wanted to do with my life. And we got a letter in the mail, all incoming freshmen did, about a new offering they had, computer science. Well, back then, there was no laptops, no PCs, no tablets, no LANs or no WAN networks type of that. Yeah. It was big mainframes, and that's what Cleveland State had, a small mainframe out there, not like some of the big companies had at the time. But if you're interested, respond to this letter and let us know. We didn't have no cell phones or no texts or no emails back in those days. This was 68. And I said, well, this sounds good. I want to respond to this. So I responded to the letter, and a lot of people responded to it. A lot of incoming freshmen had way too many, and they said, we're going to have to give everybody that PAT, Programmer's Aptitude Test, to see if you have the aptitude to be in this class, then we'll take a certain number. And I was one of the 25 that went in. 2 years later, I was one of 4 that graduated. It was tough. But graduated on a Saturday morning at Cleveland State and started Monday at Magic Chef. So my career began at Magic Chef in computer science. I was recommended by Cleveland State to get a job there. Mr. Alex Nichols, who's passed away, he was one of my instructors, and he recommended me when they called looking for a young guy in the computer world at Magic Chef. So I started there and worked my way into computer operations as the manager, and then the systems analyst and the programmer, and then I left there 20 years later as the director of IT, we called it. Information technology, as it's known then, because all these nomenclatures.
They changed the name.
Yeah, make it sound more fancy and more difficult and more hard, I guess. Well, it's okay if you pay us more.
Yeah.
And then I stayed there, but I got into outside sales with selling image equipment for Kodak through a company here in town called Laser Graphics, and we sold imaging equipment like banks would use, hospitals would use, businesses would use to scan payroll records or to scan business records, invoices, and things of that nature. And it basically was just film based. It was just a piece of paper put on film, and you had to go look it up on a film machine to reader to find it. Well, then in the early '90s, it got really upgraded to digitizing, and so you're now using digital scanners. And then you can get on a computer now and recall documents by a social security number or a date or a check number, like in a bank. You can look up check number or account number, and it got really, real sophisticated. And Kodak, we were certified brokers for Kodak equipment, and we had to go to Rochester, New York all the time to be trained on that. You couldn't sell it. Well, you could sell it, but you wouldn't get paid for it. I mean, they wanted somebody who knew what they was doing, because we had to train all the people to use it who bought the equipment. So I moved from there into there for several years, and went into corporate sales with Staples, like the business store over here. But they were my competitor. I didn't work out of the store. I hit the big place like TVA and large companies like Magic Ship and all that was my account base. But when I retired from there, I went to Life Bridges, which is for mentally challenged adults down here on Old Chattanooga Pike. Yeah. My sister was a client there until she passed away. So I retired from there 7 years ago, and now I had time on my hands. So Chuck Clark, you got to write this book now. You have no excuse. You got to write this book. So I started going to the library to do this basketball book, going back and looking at old newspapers from way back in the 1900s.
Like the microfilms?
Yes, till I went blind almost. I mean, I was there so much people thought I worked there.
Did you ever know Troy Dixon?
Yes. Sir, could you help me look this up? Well, I don't work here. Oh, you're here all the time. Thought you did. Yeah. No, I'm doing a book. And then the people at the library finally, they picked up on this pretty quick, and they'd come over and say, "Hey, Gary, I got something here. You need to look at this. Here's a story about some Bradley County schools or Bradley County sports, And I dug through all the microfilm, and I had about 6,000 different scores from basketball that I looked up, just individual scores that's in the book. And it's a historical book about basketball from day one. Bradley boys started playing in 1920, the girls in 1921, and it comes forward from that very first year all the way through with every score. And then somebody said, "Well, now you got to do a football book." Well, in the time I was doing research for basketball, I'd see these sidebar stories about football. I started making some notes, and thinking back in my mind, football would be an interesting story to make too. And it's coming up on the 100th year of Bradley football, and that's where I developed that. They started playing in 1916, and my book came out at the end of the 1916 season, I guess. We skipped 1 year for 1918 because the Spanish flu and World War I, 1918, was worldwide rampant.
Did they cancel sports that year?
They did at most schools, because the men were fighting. The men who were high school age, they're all fighting the war. And those same guys came back out of the war and went back to high school at 20, 21 years old. There was no TSSAA at the time. TSSAA didn't come into vogue until April 1925.
So they
there's no rules.
Leave. What age did they join the Army then?
Well, 16 and 17, they lied about their age, like my dad. He wasn't old enough to join. He was 17, I think. And I think that's one of the reasons the spelling of the name got changed. He could tell you back then why it got changed. It had to do with something back in those days.
So the Spanish flu, you're talking about in Bradley County?
Yeah, well, worldwide. It was worldwide. It's way worse than COVID is. It was Spanish flu, and it killed tens of millions of people, I guess. And I don't know if COVID's going to kill them.
Did they do like we're doing now, say we're shutting the schools down, or?
No. School went right along. There weren't enough males around, though, to have football. And back then, like at Bradley, you only had like 20 guys on a team. Nowadays, you got 80 and 90 or 100 guys on a high school team, the size of Bradley's anyway. But back then, you only have a handful. And Coach Jimmy Lovell, who came to Bradley out of Tennessee in 1917, our second year football, he was a 4-year letterman in Tennessee in basketball, football, baseball, and track. He was an all-around athlete. He came to Bradley just fresh out of college and started football program, or had the second year of it in 1917. Then 1918 were shut down. Well, he stayed until 1938 coaching football. He's the longest tenured and the winningest coach at Bradley football history. He coached boys basketball, coached when it started in 20. He coached football, baseball, and track and field. He coached all those sports. There's only when Bradley opened in 1916, there's only 8 kids graduated in senior class, 8 total. Period. There's a picture of them down in the office.
Where did they go before that?
We had a lot of 2-year schools.
2-year high schools?
2-year high schools, like Tasso had a school, Black Fox had a school. There was there's been over 200 schools in Bradley County that are closed. There's a book in the library I found that they brought to me about all the schools that are close to Bradley County. It's over 200 schools at one time that were here in existence.
Because Bradley County was started when?
Bradley County.
That goes back to the Taylor Spring, I guess, right?
Yep, Taylor Springs is where the city of Cleveland came from, you know. And Charleston was going to be the seat of the county way back in the day. I found all this history out too. And it was on the river. And back then, a lot of things moved by the river. And that's not a big river, the Hiwassee, but that was where the...
and Calhoun.
And Calhoun is right there, you know, it's Twin Cities. But anyway, Taylor Springs down here obviously got developed in where the people grew up around the water, I guess, down here. But the school system, if you look at the Bradley County School logo, it says 1836, I think is the year it has in their logo that they have on the county school system, anything related to that. I believe that's the year. But the earliest existence that I could find of a county school was in 1860-something. There was a school down here by the old Y, where the old Y used to be down here on
4th Street.
4th Street on that corner. And I've got a picture of it in my book of that school building. It's a 2-story building.
Where'd you get that picture?
At the library. I dug and dug and dug for that picture, and I couldn't find it. And lo and behold, I was standing there at the library one day. I knew what it sort of looked like. And behind Margot was a lady up there at the library who's historical at the old library. Right behind her on a shelf there, I think it's over a fireplace. I said, my goodness, that looks like, what is that picture there, you know? And that was a picture of that school. 2-story, and it was from 1 through 12. It was called Central School. Central School and Central High School. Bradley Central opened in 1916 as Central High School.
I guess that's where we get the Bradley Central High School.
It opened in 1916 as Central High School and stayed Central High School. Charleston.
Prior to that, there were just 2-year satellite places.
So when they opened Bradley in 1916 on Ocoee Street now, it was called Charleston Pike. It was a dirt road. I got a picture of that in here too, in the book. That it's aerial view. Somebody had an airplane back in 1960 and took an aerial picture of that. And you
Before
can see,
the pandemic, first pandemic.
Yes, it's 1916. And you see the dirt road was Charleston Pike, and that was way out in the sticks at the time. Way out in the sticks. There was no Ocoee Street. Matter of fact, the city limits stopped there where the public library is at now. There's a marker in front of the public library. It tells you where the city limits stopped at that time. Mm-hmm. So all that beyond that, Ocoee wasn't no Lee University, wasn't no Lee College, but they had the school out there. And when they brought the 4-year school together, all these 2-year schools, hey, I can go now 3rd year, and all these 2-year schools started falling by the wayside because you go to Bradley for 9th and 10th grade now, and they started the first ever bus service, school bus. At that time, they had no buses up to that point.
In what year?
In 1916, and there was a school in Charleston called Bradley High School, Bradley County High School is what it was called. But when the school we know as Bradley Central opened as Central High School in 1916, they changed the name up there to that school to Charleston. So Charleston became Charleston High School up there then, and it was a very, very small school, and it never really grew up into a large school.
Who funded this 2-year high schools? Were they county?
Well, they were held in churches or homes because they didn't build school buildings, and they had churches that were empty during the week. So,
who was in charge of those?
Oh, I don't think they had a superintendent. I think, hey, we got a community here of people. Let's have our kids go together here.
Like Little House on the Prairie.
Teacher. Yeah.
Same sort of thing.
Just back in the good old days.
They had class in the schools.
And found books.
They take turns teaching.
Yep. Got school books, and here we have this community, like at Black Fox, like at Taylor's, and at Tasso, all these little community schools, but a lot of them were held in churches because they were empty during the week, and the kids could go there and had a building with heat and all that stuff. Had coal and wood burning heaters, stuff like that. But the schools developed that way, and then Bradley Central High School was renamed Bradley County High School in 1920. And some of the old timers still don't want to turn loose the name Bradley County, but it became Bradley Central High School in 1948. And that's when they built the gym that's there today in 1948, and they built the old auditorium that is still there, I guess, in 1948. That same year, built both of those for $249,000, I believe, at the time. Nowadays, it probably costs you $20 million to build those two things. Yeah. But they've redone the gym and all that, so it's still there. But Bradley Central, as we know it, became by that name in 1948. So that's stuff I just found out looking at sports stuff. You get on
another hobby.
Well, yeah, and I'd find myself looking up trying to find these scores, and I'd get sidetracked. And well, here's a great story on the a woman kills his wife because she killed his chicken or something, and crazy stories back then. Train derailments. There's a lot of train derailments back in those days, and people getting killed, these freak accidents, which we don't see nowadays. But I'd get spend half my time there reading all these other interesting stories, nothing related to sports, but
just to get through them to get to the next.
And they say, hey, I got to get back, focus on what I want to do here with the book. So, but anyway, the books came out. The basketball book came out the first year, and
so the origin for this was because the Clark guy said you ought to write this because of all the information you had.
Well, I kept finding this information, and I kept showing it to people like him, and he was really the inspiration to me. And I've told him this before, if it hadn't been for him pushing me to do that, because I didn't have an excuse when I retired. I was looking for something to do anyway, and it took me about 2 years to put them both together. It's not something you just walk in there and it falls out in your lap. There's a lot of digging. I went to the Chattanooga Library and went down there and looked up things I couldn't find in Cleveland Library. The Cleveland Daily Banner was not a daily banner until 1920 something. They were the Cleveland Banner.
And you found that out through this research.
Yep, I kept looking back in these old newspaper files, and we've had the Morning Sun. Remember the Morning Sun newspaper?
I remember that.
Bradley County Weekly. Remember that? Both have gone to the
Bradley
wayside. But the Cleveland Banner, Cleveland Daily Banner, there was one from Polk County. I forget the name of that. That are no longer in existence. And the Banner became daily. I think 1921 or 2, somewhere along there. Now it's not even daily anymore. It's a 3 time a week. But things change rapidly. But the interesting things that you find looking for one thing, and then you get sidetracked looking for something, or if you see something else that you got to read it, because it just jumps out at you there. But it was a lot of fun, and it's just a labor of love to do all that. And what I did is I found a publisher here in town, like Chuck, to put me on the publisher for the basketball book. Told me where to go, and he went out there with me. We met the guys, and they printed my first basketball book. And the football book, I knew more about how to do it then, so I went on to a different company and got them printed. And I've got copies. I've got a few copies of the football book left, but this is about the last basketball book.
Well, that's a nice looking book.
Well, it was a lot of fun to put together, and what it inspired and why it did it. We should have done more, but I was hoping that other schools would see that. Hey, we need one of these for our school. We don't have nothing like this. We had a guy last year. It came to the Bradley Girls Thanksgiving basketball tournament that happens Friday and Saturday after Thanksgiving, and he was from Georgia. And he came up to me. He said, "Somebody here said you have a book about Bradley sports." And I said, "Yes, sir. I've got 2 of them, as a matter of fact." And I said, "I have copies of them in my car because people are always coming up to me and wanting to get one. I want to have them with me. Well, could I buy a couple of copies?" And I sold him a couple of copies right there that day at the school on a Friday. And he come back in Saturday. He said, "Man, I was up all night long reading this book." He said, "We got a great big school as big as Bradley down here near Atlanta." And he said, "We have nothing like this." He said, "I'm taking this back, and I'm going to embarrass our guys and maybe force him into doing that." But it's strange too when you put stuff down in print. You know how it is when you catch a fish. Or well, today I caught a fish, or tomorrow it's this big, and then my grandkids, oh, it's this big now. But I'd find people who saw the book and said, "Hey, I had a 100-yard touchdown back in this day, or I did this, or I did that," and it's strictly out of the paper, what I found all this. And so it's pretty factual stuff that I put in there.
If it's wrong,
I didn't make stuff up.
If it's wrong, the paper was wrong, right?
Yes. And I told people that. And I had a fella call me. He lived up Charleston. He played for Bradley back in the 1950s and 60s with Sloan and all those guys. And he said, "Your longest run in there is not right." So I had one longer than that. I think my longest was 95. I had one longer than that. And I went back and looked it up in the library. And I called him back, and I ain't going to tell you his name, but I said, I think I'm right. I didn't tell him I'd go back and look it up. He said, "Well, I've got the newspaper clipping out here in the storage. I'm going to dig it out."
Never heard from him again, right?
No. He called me back. He said, "You know what? I'm embarrassed. You're right." He had a 93-yard run, a couple of yards shy, of this record.
Maybe back then the newspaper was accurate.
Well, I think it was, and even back then, what's crazy, they would list they had a box score for football. We have a box score, which is different back then. It'd have who scored, and they had all the players that played in the game in football, every single one that played. And there's only like 15 that play every game. It also had the names of the referees. Their names was listed, like Gary Ownbey. And the school they graduated from, Vanderbilt or Georgia Tech or Tennessee. And I don't know why they did that in those days. Does that reinforce the fact that they're smarter than we are, or what? But they wouldn't need to put their names in there nowadays.
I think people back then were more meticulous about everything.
No, it might have been. They could have been. But doing something like that, a lot of people don't have time to do that, and a lot of people would not want to do, sit down and spend all that time writing. But it's
so it's a history of the baseball and
basketball
and football. That's specific. It's history, but specifically designed for football and basketball.
Yeah. And I've already been
Well, this looks like an annual, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's 300-something pages long. And I told the publisher, I said, it's only going to be 250. Well, I couldn't stop at 250. And it's got a lot of the history of the school itself and the TSSAA and records that happened throughout the years.
And does it go up to Jimmy Lovell Field? Where is that?
That's Bradley's football field right now.
That's right.
It was initially named that at the old school.
That's how
that monument there is now at Bradley, right outside the box office there at Bradley.
And how close does this go to current times?
It goes through 2016 if you look on the front cover.
Oh, I see.
100 years of football.
Are you going to do an update?
I'm not going to answer that right now.
And the same
football
way
went
here.
through 2015. It's a year
I
later.
see. And the reason 2021 is that's when they probably started having basketball there.
When the girls and boys started playing in that 21 year. Boys in 21, girls in 22. I think I misquoted a minute ago, but that's when they started. And they had back then in basketball, you'd play teams like Peerless Woolen Mills. The high school teams would play them. They'd play colleges. We played colleges in football. You know, like Tennessee Wesleyan, which at the time was not known as Tennessee Wesleyan. It was Grant University. And
so the high school would play the college?
Yes.
Because there's just nobody else to play?
But the colleges are not like Tennessee nowadays.
Yeah.
You know, they were small schools, but they had nobody to play them. A lot of schools didn't have football. A lot of them didn't have basketball, especially girls basketball.
But now they've got how many sports?
At Bradley?
Yeah,
I think 14. I mean, everything from golf to tennis to lacrosse now is the new sport. Wrestling, girls wrestling now, boys wrestling, girls wrestling, basketball, football.
Is that a good idea to have so many sports?
Well, it's what the people want. Because you may have a child who is terrible at football but loves soccer, wants to play soccer, or a girl that wants to play soccer, or a tennis.
Is it the schools? Is it the county's obligation to fund this stuff?
Well, the kids pay a lot of buy their own equipment and stuff. Now they don't buy the football uniforms, but you know, there's things they have to pay for, and they have to pay a fee.
And is that right? If they're going to play for the school should pay for it.
Well, depends on which side you're arguing.
Yeah.
Because parents, it costs a lot of money, and it takes a lot of money though to put on
I remember playing sports in high school and some in junior high, and I never remember paying anything.
Well, it's different nowadays because it's so expensive to play any sport, and there's a fee. Now, I'm not saying every sport has a fee. I know football and things like that have some out-of-pocket expense. You're not paying for your whole uniform because to dress a football player, it's several $100s. The helmet alone is $300, I believe. You got pads, you got the shirt, you got to have 2 different jerseys, you got to have 2 different pants because different colors. If you're home or road, you got to have different colors that you wear. And of course, the shoes are not cheap, and you got to have the socks and all the other things that go with that. So it's Damon Floyd at Bradley can show you. He's got it charted. He can show you how much it costs just to put on a single football game at Bradley High School. I mean, it's $600. Mark the fill off. You know, it's not
every time.
Every home game $600. Yeah. And right now he's looking at 2 home games next year.
What would they have done back in 1925? Would they have striped the field again?
I don't know because I got some neat stories in there about the old Bradley High School. They didn't have lights till 34. And once Bradley got lights in 34, I believe it was, every team they played wanted to come to Bradley and play because they could play a game at night.
Before that, they had to be done by 5:45.
They started at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And they had to take a train. They had to take a train to the games back then. The football team took trains. They got a great story in there about them going to Knoxville.
They would have to get...
They'd have to take an 11 o'clock train.
Yeah, 11
They had to check
o'clock.
with the trains, see, when does a train leave going to Knoxville? Well, going to Knoxville was an 11 o'clock train. And they'd go up there, and like this playing TMI in Sweetwater, which is Tennessee Military Institute at the time. It's no longer in existence. But they'd go up there, and they'd let them off the train right there near the school, and they would go over there and play ball and wait for the next train to come back. They'd take the train to Chattanooga.
The train may not come back through till 2 in the morning.
Well, they made sure they could get back that day.
Now, how would they get from the train station? Now, where was the train station?
Walk. They let them off there in the book it's talking about at Sweetwater. They didn't go to the depot. The TMI school was not at a train depot, so they let them off there. I guess the train just stopped for them, and they'd walk over there, you know, to the field, literally, you know, carrying their stuff.
No wonder they had 15.
It was a different world back then. These kids nowadays don't appreciate what they get. You know, they got the luxurious things of like dressing rooms and all that kids back then didn't have.
They didn't
it's
have,
unheard of.
They didn't. Where would they change into their uniforms?
Well, they warm up there. They warm up there, and there's a story in there.
That's why you see on those movies they'll be carrying their shoulder pads but wearing their pants, I guess.
Yeah, probably. But the story in there when they played TMI one time, TMI was their big foe at the time, way back in those days.
Which was what?
Back in the 20s.
TMI, what was that?
Tennessee Military Institute up in Sweetwater. And they were trying to get not a custom train, but a private train, I guess, charter train, to go up there. And Coach Lovell told his guys, he said, well, he talked to the people at Southern Railway, so it was at the time. He talked to them, said to do that, you'd have to have 100 or 200 paying customers, and it cost $1.39 round trip to go, plus tax.
Yeah.
And it's about $1.50 per person to go. They said we could do that if you'd have 100. I think it's 100. The story's in there. It's one of the best stories I had, and I don't remember the numbers though. You can go up there. We'll have a charter crane take you to TMI, and then bring you back. And TMI was early in the season type of game. Well, he switched that game, called them and said, hey, can we switch this at the end of the year? Our final game of the year, actually, TMI. And then he told his team they had a really good team. About 6 games in, he had a meeting with the team and told them, says, guys, if we can get enough guys to, ladies and gentlemen, to buy a ticket, we'll take a charter train with just us on it. And they had 400 people, not 100, but 400 people sign up. So they just overwhelmingly, and that's where I use the phrase in our Bear Nation, as they call the Bear fans. That's where one of the original big outpourings of the Bear Nation. That's the fan base went up there, and they went up there. And TMI, these big military guys. It was a post-grad school up there, so these were not high school kids up there either. They were post-grad kids who were being trained there to go into the military. This is back in the days, World War I had just ended. We didn't know, but World War II was coming down, pretty soon, a few years later. But they went up there and they just kicked the butt of TMI in that game, which they were big underdogs to even be on the field with. But we went there and won that, and that was in that book too. But,
less than 100 years ago.
Yeah, and it was, and stories like that, is what makes it fun to find stuff like that and bring it out to the public. And I had a book signing over at the library with Margot. She was there and stood up and had a bunch of coaches, people come in there and said, man, I didn't know anything at all about stuff like this. And I got to, writing the football book, I got to meet a lot of folks like Bob Johnson, who would play for Bradley and went to Tennessee, was All-American. Went the very first ever draft selection for the Cincinnati Bengals, the very first. Paul Brown drafted him. Great story about Bob, and talking about in there when he was drafted by the Bengals, by the Browns. No, it's Bengals, Cincinnati Bengals. Now his family owns the Browns now, but it was Cincinnati Bengals back then. And he got drafted, and his son, Paul Brown's son, was an attorney, and that's who did the negotiating for players who were drafted, how much you're going to get paid, And he came to Cleveland, and his dad was, Paul, worked for Hardwick Stove, and they came here from Chicago. The Johnson family came here. Now there's Bill, Bob, Paul, and Bill was the doctor,
Yeah.
And there's Paul and John and Tom, who played football. And
Tom,
all of them, 3 of them went to Tennessee. But Mike Brown came down here to negotiate the contract with Bob Johnson, and they sat down, and Bob told me a story, said we sat down in the living room there, and he throws his contract out there. And it was, back then, it was nothing like today,
Yeah.
It was, and the offer apparently was not good. He said, I can't remember what the amount was, but Dad said, come here a minute, Bob. Walked into the kitchen, and he said, you go back there and tell that guy that you're not going to pay for twice that amount. And they didn't know it, but Bob had a scholarship to Harvard in his pocket, in his back pocket. He said, take it in there and show him that. We don't need your football team. We got a Harvard scholarship here. And he went back in there, and he told the guy, said, we're not going to play for half that, And he said, really? Because that's pretty standard. He said, I've got this, though. It's Harvard scholarship in my back pocket. I don't have to have football. Well, he goes back to his dad and talks to Paul, who was the owner, general manager, guy who drafted all the players, and told him what he said. He said, we got to have this guy. It's the very first player that ever drafted as a franchise. They want to build their team around him. He was a center.
That's been good.
And that's who he was. He was in the Hall of Fame. He's in everything you can be in that world. And so they had him come to Cincinnati. So now he's sitting there in Paul Brown's office, And now he's come back with a better offer. He said, okay, that's a fair offer. And he read the amount to Bob, and he said, Johnson, like I say, you better be damn good. And he was all pro.
Yeah.
They retired. He's the only Cincinnati Bengals ever had his uniform retired, the only one. And they had a big deal on NBC Sports.
Tom's
about
brother.
him. Yeah, Bob Johnson, yeah. And he owns his company up, and he stayed in Cincinnati, owns a company up there, and I guess he's probably not retired. He might be retired by now, but he wasn't retired when I wrote that book in 2016. So, and I interviewed Tom Johnson for the book too.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't interview Paul. He's in California, living out there, but he played college ball, and his sons played college football. And another fellow I met that's really interesting was Steve Sloan. You know, Steve Sloan, everybody around here, if you've lived here at all, you know who Steve Sloan was. Basketball, football, baseball, golf, at Bradley, four-sport letterman, and good in every one of them, extremely good in every one of them. And he lives in Florida. Of course, he coached played football for Bear Bryant, Alabama, and people were mad because he didn't go to Tennessee. Well, Tennessee's running a single-wing offense at the time. I know you don't know what football is, but you don't throw the ball. You know, he was a passing quarterback, all-state quarterback out of Bradley when we won the state championship in '61, the fall of '61, and he just was not interested in going to Tennessee and playing single-wing football. And Bear Bryant at Alabama, who had Joe Namath as his starting quarterback at the time, brought Sloan in there. And Sloan didn't play much his first couple of years, and then his junior year, he was back up to Namath, who got in trouble down there at the Sugar Bowl, I guess it would have been the Sugar Bowl. You know, Namath is a wild guy, and he's out doing things he shouldn't have been doing and carousing, and he got benched. Sloan stepped in, and they won the national title in that game in the national title. The next year, Namath's gone, they win it again. And Sloan made his mark there as a quarterback in Alabama. That whole story is in the book, too. And then he went on to coach, you know, with Rex Dockery, and Rex was killed in a plane crash out when he was coaching at Memphis. He coached at Texas Tech. He coached at Alabama. He coached at Vanderbilt first, I guess, as head coach. First coached at Georgia Tech for a little while. Went to Vanderbilt and turned that program around at the time. Now, it's back in the doldrums where Vanderbilt football usually stays, but he became athletic director at Alabama, and then he became athletic director at a couple other schools, and came to UTC. He retired from UTC as athletic director down here in Chattanooga, and moved back to Florida. Him and Brenda, his wife, live there in Florida now. So that's I spent a lot of time with him on the phone, and we didn't have to sit down face to face. We passed letters back and forth. And Steve's the old school guy. I don't do email. I don't do texting. So if you need something, write me. And I've got these letters at home. We'd write to him, and he'd write back. And that's the only way we communicate. So he's got a cell phone, but he didn't do anything electronically.
Text or nothing.
No, he said, I don't do that. He said, don't expect me to do that. I said, okay, whatever works for you works for me, you know. But people like him are interesting to meet, and just as humble a guy as you'd ever meet. And the story in book 2 about him was, it's talking about how good he was at any sport he wanted to play. And back when Jimmy Corn owned the Village Lanes, the bowling alley down here and all that, he challenged Steve to a bowling match. Steve never bowled in his life. He said, let's go bowl. Let's see how good you are at bowling. And he beat him. He beat Corn in that. He said, well, you know, I learned my lesson, you know.
Some people are just natural athletes.
And he was, yeah. Those are few and far between, but he was one of those. But he did also humbly, you know. He beat his dad first time in golf, he told me. He didn't tell me. I read this story in the paper. First time he ever beat his dad in golf. They made a big deal about that. And he was just like a 12 or 13-year-old kid. And it embarrassed Steve. You know, just embarrassing him. Hey, I beat my dad. Preacher Sloan, I beat my dad. And he said that was not a good thing in his book, you know, in his eyes.
Yeah.
But great person, you know, and a great representative for Bradley High School and this whole Cleveland community now. But I don't know if he'll ever move back up here. He likes living. He lives on a golf course down there.
Probably
he lives on Masters Boulevard, as it's called, but it's not the Masters.
Yeah.
It's down in Orlando.
So you spent 2 or 3 hours, 5, 6 hours a week doing this?
Oh, 5 or 6 hours a day. Days on end. My wife said, well, let me know if you're going to come home today, you know. Because the library, I did it all at the old library. And see, it's only open, it doesn't open like on Thursday, it don't open till 1 o'clock. But it stays open to 8 o'clock. So during the other hours, it's open from 8 to 4 or 5 or 6 or something like
What's
that.
What's significant about Thursdays?
I don't know. I guess, well, they wanted to have an evening. It opened for the evening for people that couldn't come in during the day. And it's open on Sunday afternoons.
That's the old library.
Yeah, the archives, they call that.
Oh.
That's where all the microfiche and microfilm and historical records are up in the 1970s. And then you have to go to the new library to get microfilm for anything
At
later.
the new library, they won't hardly let you take your phone in there.
Well, it's probably not a bad thing.
But what about the old library?
Well, I would have mine with me, but I have it turned off, have it muted. And they frown on you talking on your phone because they want it quiet. I mean, people are doing research like I was. I didn't want to be sitting here, somebody over here yapping about their dog getting out loose or something like that.
But you can't check a book out. If you could check the book out,
no, that's a
it'd
reference.
be different.
Yes, you can't check.
But you're
them out.
looking at microfilms, and it wouldn't make sense for you to take home 7 books to look at 2 articles.
No, and I did all there, and a lot of the information I found was back in the Bradley Annuals, the old, the Ocoyan, which is what it was called, the annual. So I saw a lot of things there, and like I said, I had to go to Chattanooga to the libraries down there, the Hamilton County Library, and they have a lot of stuff there. And I'd go back to the old Chattanooga Free Press and Chattanooga Times, which is now the Times Free Press, and then they had some Post or something they had down there, that different newspapers, and they helped me down there. The people at the library know what they're doing. They can direct you. You know, if you say, hey, I need to find out where this happened, or when it happened, or something on this, and they can say, well, here's where we need to look. And these people over here are great too at the Cleveland Library to help me.
But the archives where you would spend most of your time.
Oh yeah, by far, yeah. And the stuff later on in the book, I've got 3 or 4 file cabinets at home full of newspapers. I mean, 4-drawer file cabinets full of newspaper clippings that I've kept since I was 8 or 9 years old. And my wife said, what are you going to do with those? I said, I don't know. Kids probably burn them when I die or something, you know. But
yeah.
I just couldn't turn them loose. And they're still there, and I've got them.
Would you say you're a hoarder?
You could probably call me that. I've been called a lot worse, but I've got it set up by decades, you know. I can go in there and say, well, here's my stuff from the 60s or the 70s or 80s or 90s or whatever in this sport. And here it is in football, and here it is in baseball, and here it is in whatever, you know. And I got a lot of things together doing these books that people gave me. People call me and say, hey, I've got these old programs. I had a lady call me from Chattanooga. I didn't know who she was. She had gone to Bradley. She lived in Chattanooga. I forget what she did now. I think she was a nurse. Didn't know who she was. She says, you need to meet me somewhere and let's look at the stuff I've got. And it is the Kyle family. You know, the Kyle automotive folks. She was a daughter of, I forget which one it was now, but we went to his house. He lives down at McDonald. One of Mr. Kyle's went down there, and he'd brought a box out of his attic or someplace and started going, here's a football program from 1926 or something like that. I've got a picture of it in
Golly,
there that he had kept. It was in pristine condition. It had been kept folded up among some other books and things.
Did he give it to you, or just such?
No, I didn't want to ask him for that, because he was an old Bradley fan, played football. Him and all of his brothers. As a matter of fact, there was 5 of them, I think, playing at one time on the same team. That was the only family I could find. And I found one family, the Elmore family, with 4 generations that played, 4 separate generations, starting with the granddad, and then the grandson, his dad.
That'd be Jim Elmore. Jim Elmore, I bet.
Yep. And Franklin Elmore, and
I got Jim's picture in the hall.
Do you?
Yep.
That's the only 4-generation family I could find. Now, I'm not saying there's not others, but it's the only one I could document. And like I said, I don't put in there if I can't.
But he didn't know anything about football.
Really?
Jim, no.
Well, he's one of that Elmore family.
Yeah.
It's Harry.
Harry was brother, I think.
Yeah. It's Harry, and from that point down, that's how they
Yeah.
came through there. They were all good football players, though. Franklin played on the 76 state championship team for Bradley. He was one of the mainstays for that team.
If they were to have a museum, you could stock the whole thing, but why have a museum when you can just sit and read this book?
Well, a lot of people heard about the book, started calling me and texting me. I don't have.
How much does it cost to get this published? I know that's expensive.
It cost about $10 per copy. I had 500 copies made. It cost about $10, and that's with a.
What would that be? About 5,000?
Yeah, and
so
I sold ads.
Did you have to type it, or do they type it when they do
I
that?
typed every single letter in that book.
So these words, you typed all that?
I did every bit of that.
They don't do that for 5,000. All they do is print.
They expect you to bring it to them in a form that they can use.
This is nice paper, though.
Yeah, it's and like I said,
paper.
I did it second. This one is a different look. This one has more pictures in it. But
there's Chief.
Yeah, I did a big article on Chief Bill Robertson. What a superhuman being. Died on the day that the tornadoes hit in 2014.
I played golf with him about 3 weeks before he died.
Did you?
Yep.
Man,
he was good.
What a gentleman he was.
He really was.
And I gave all the money. I sold ads.
He told me, playing golf that day,
Yeah.
that Dolly Parton was his cousin.
Oh, he dated her. He dated her back
That's what
then.
it was. He said he dated her. Maybe both of them.
Well, when he was dying, we had a luncheon meeting for him. Not a luncheon meeting, but
he was a city
councilman. Yep. And we had a big deal at Bradley with.
He loved to eat breakfast.
Yep. He loved knee-high grape. That was his drink.
Yep, knee-high grape.
And Dolly Parton sent a letter to us Said, Chief, my old
I
boyfriend.
remember that,
And
my
he
old
had the letter.
boyfriend.
They read the letter at that dinner we had for him there when we knew he was not long for the world. And a bunch of his folks from,
Why do they call him Chief?
well, he's part Indian,
Yeah, obviously.
and he worked there at the old,
Don't tell me. Don't tell me. Don't tell me.
I can't think of it.
Don't tell me.
But you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking
park.
about.
He was an Indian chief there.
No. He worked at. He was the head of that thing on Sunset Drive. In later years.
Yeah.
Some delinquent children.
Oh yeah, Gold Academy.
The Gold Academy. Yeah, he was in charge.
He was a disciplinarian, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But he worked there at the at one of the parks, not Dollywood, but what was it called before that? Silver Dollar City.
Yeah.
He's dressed in an Indian costume. I got a picture of him in there. He's dressed in an Indian costume.
I saw him there.
Shows him talking to a little kid there, and
I liked him, and he liked me.
he had some Cherokee blood in there somewhere along the line.
But this is really nice paper. So after you just send it to them, and they do all the printing.
Well,
they do the binding and.
I went down over there and sat down with both of them and said, "Here's what my plan is."
Where are these people located?
Well, this was in Cleveland. It's over here at the right inside the back cover, Dawkins Graphics.
I don't know where they're at.
They're down there on Old Overhead Bridge Road.
Never heard of them.
Chip Dawkins.
Chip Dawkins.
Oh,
So
man.
they do this.
They do that, and I took it down there. I went down there first. Said, "I've just got an idea. I want to do a book." You know.
Is that an old business, reckon?
Yeah.
I mean,
Used to be Caldwell Dawkins.
but I mean, as far as going out of style now that everybody's got it on their phone, or are they still?
Well, everything I did, I put on the computer, and I sent them files on the computer. I had to print them up, type them all up. And I went down to this is over here at APS, Advanced Photographic Services, the old Copser building. That's where they were at.
So you didn't do the same one?
No, I went and talked to them, and I said, I want a better binding than this. So this is called perfect binding.
Now this looks expensive.
Yeah, and so I sold ads in the back.
But $10 a book.
That's what I paid for it. And I sold it for $30, and I gave all the money to the football program. I gave all the money to the basketball program for this one. I didn't want to make any money off of it. If I do another, I'm going to keep it.
Why not?
Well, I felt like, I don't know why. I thought, you know what? I'm just doing it as a labor of love. I want them to have the benefit from that. So I just gave them all the money. And
that'd have just been 10 grand or something, right? If you sold all the books for 30, that'd just be.
Yeah, we made about 20,000 and made about 10 grand off of this one.
Yeah.
And they set me up accounts down at the high school, and I just take the checks or cash down there and give it to them, and they put them in there. And then I told the coach, I said, "It's your money. Take it out of there when you need it."
But it was gone quick.
Well, they need some things they needed to have that they didn't have the luxury of buying, maybe.
When you got finished, did you say, "Phew"?
Yeah. My wife said, "I'll shoot
Would
you."
you last the rest? So was it the last word? You said, "Phew."
No, I felt like that, but it was fun though. It's just
Who edits it? I mean, as far as getting the grammar right and all that.
me. I'm the lock, stock, and barrel.
So you use like a Microsoft Word or something?
Yeah, and there's a lot of powerful stuff you can use, and the hard part was trying to get the pictures positioned where I wanted them positioned. So I had to put them in a separate file.
But it's nice fonts. I mean, it's easy read.
Yeah. Well, they told me how
Red
it would look.
I remember
best.
that one.
Yeah.
Bill Walker. That's the. He was.
Basketball coach, won a state title, then became superintendent right in the middle of the season.
He was the superintendent.
He was
now,
appointed
when
back
I was in FFA, and I was supposed to drive the van somewhere, and I got in it and backed up and hit his car.
You hit Bill Walker's car?
Bill Walker's car.
Uh-oh.
And you know what he said? He said, "It's not your fault, son. I shouldn't have parked there."
Well, that's nice of him.
That was nice. I never will forget that.
He was a heck of a coach back in his day.
All I know,
math at
he
Bradley.
smoked a pipe.
Yep. He taught math, Bradley. He won a state title the same year that Smitty won his first one in '62, spring '62.
That's when I went there.
Yep. So you came at a good time.
Did you get any words in here wrong that you forgot to edit? If nobody's, I mean, as far as.
Oh, I'm sure they are, and there's a couple of errors in there that we found.
Like add an E when it's supposed to be an A or something.
Well,
minor.
I used Word to go back and it checked your grammar.
Yeah.
It says this doesn't make sense. Here's an alternative version of saying this. Of course, it's easy If I misspell something, it'd find misspelled words. But if you use the wrong word, but it's not misspelled, it won't catch that. So that's what.
Yeah, that's right. Because they don't know if they can do that, they just write the book for you.
Yeah,
I guess.
But it's not rocket science. It's not hard to do. It just takes so much time to do it. But I enjoy doing that. But so the education, when I retired, I was able to do that, and I worked at Life Bridges down there for I think 5 or 6 years, till I got to the point where I retired. My wife got cancer, and she's in remission. She's good now, but my mother developed dementia, and I had not planned on retiring that early. But I told them down there, I said, look, I got my two most important women in my life need me more than this place needs me. Mm-hmm. So I'm out of here. I give them a 30-day notice and worked that out, and then I started. Still going to Bradley games, and a good friend of mine, a late friend of mine, Don Burke, who passed away from COVID back in the summer, he said, what are you going to do with yourself? And I said, I don't know. He said, you need a sub up here. We need male subs at Bradley, substitute teachers. And he taught me into getting into the area where I'm in now, subbing. I went down to the central office and filled out an application and started subbing
and
7 years ago.
You had not taught anything?
No. I in class, I talk about my life experience with a lot of kids, and we've traveled a lot. My wife and I have traveled just a lot of places over in Europe and around that we've thoroughly enjoyed. And I talk about that with them a lot of times, just try to get them fired up, and we've traveled with school groups, and done things in the U.S. But no, I'm not a teacher. I tell people I'm just a low-paid babysitter down there at the school.
What do you do? Like the teacher that's out, they leave you what you're supposed to say or something?
Yeah, any teacher, like I'm subbing 4 days this coming week, and they will have the lessons already prepared. And it's all done electronically on the computer now. If they need a sub, they put it in the computer. I need a sub for this day.
Is that do they have an obligation to put what you're supposed to teach them while you're gone?
Well, they need to, but sometimes they get up in the morning, and some of them have small kids that are sick.
They didn't know they were going to be out.
No, but they will then call and say, hey, here's what I need you to do today. I was going to give them a test or have them read this and answer the questions and do whatever. And a lot of the stuff nowadays, a lot of it is done on the internet through what they call Schoology and Google Classroom, where they can actually set the lessons up on the computer, and they can be at home and monitoring the kids and say, hey, I've had a call from one of the teachers, I'm not going to name it. He says, I'm sitting here looking to see who all signed on to this class to do this work. He said, little Johnny back there ain't signed on doing it. Go back there and tell little Johnny. Ask him why he's not signed on to do the work. Well, they don't know that I know that they're not doing the work. Mm-hmm. So the teacher told me, and I went back and said, how'd you know? I said, I got your teacher on the phone here. You want to talk to him?
Yeah.
And it's the way things are done nowadays in a lot of cases. So on their cell phones or on laptop or on the computer after school.
So we've gone from a 2-year high school in the county to in the schools and in the churches to you can't have church in the school.
No, not anymore.
Not supposed to pray.
All right.
And homework's done online electronically, and if they don't go to school, I guess they get in trouble, whereas then they didn't.
Well, they sure know about it nowadays. Back then, I don't know what the results would be, but nowadays...
Surely it wasn't significant.
Well, like my dad went through the 3rd grade. He had to quit work to work the farm.
Well, did he get?
Or quit schooling.
Did he get permission from somebody?
No, there's nobody to get permission from. You went to school, he didn't go. There's nobody like a superintendent or a...
Now today, if you said, I'm not sending my kid to school, and they said, well, you're going to send him to a private school, you said, no, I'm not going to send him anywhere, what would happen?
I would think somebody would come knocking on your door because they'd know if you had kids of school age.
But who's the somebody?
I have no idea. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know who they are.
But a lot of people are homeschooling nowadays. Not a lot, but several.
But they are accountable.
Yes,
at least
they are.
They're going.
Oh yeah. There's kids at Bradley that play some sports that are homeschooled, but they're allowed to play sports wherever they want to.
Yeah, what was that I heard on the radio about a girl that was homeschooled and she was playing for Taylor School, and they wouldn't let her. What was that?
Well, there's a controversy in the Bradley County Parks and Recreation. I hope I'm saying this right. That if you play on those are little kids, like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, really little kids. But you have to play for the team in your community that you live in, where you're zoned for, and they
sense.
enforce that. Well, she is homeschooling, not in a school, and she was playing, lived in one community, was playing for a school in another community. There's a rule against that, and that's where the controversy came up. The county commission, who should not be involved in that at all, it's none of their business.
What they got to do with
They were the Parks and Recreation report straight to D. Gary Davis, so that's who should handle that if it has to be handled. But that's all I know about it. But if they strictly enforce the rules, that she would not be eligible to play. And that's like one of those rules. Well, if we let this girl do it or this boy do it,
well, where would you stop that?
I won't do that. Yeah.
I don't even live it. If somebody could say, I don't even live in that state, but I want to play for them.
Yeah.
I guess, right?
But yeah, you sure could.
I mean, you got to stop somewhere.
Yeah, that's why there's rules in place for things like that. But it's just it's like that everywhere. There's controversy about sports, and see, there's no zoning in Bradley County or Cleveland City. You can play and go to school wherever you want to. You got to provide your own transportation. If you want to go to, if you live way down in Valley View in the county, you can go to Cleveland High School, Walker Valley. And you can play sports there. Nobody say you can't, but you've got to get yourself there to do that.
Other than that, you can do it.
Yep.
Just got to sign up, I guess.
In some counties, like in Rutherford, which is Murfreesboro, they enforce strict zoning over there. If you live in this school zone, you're going to go to this school here that's in this zone. You're not going to go here to.
I would say there'd be a point where if you couldn't handle the students, you'd have to restrict it to just the ones in your community, wouldn't you?
Yeah. You'd have to.
I mean, you can't take everybody.
No. But, if you've got a good, let's say you've got a great audio video program. We give Mr. Schroyer some love here. Mm-hmm. And he's got a great one there. And if you've got a kid who's interested in something like that and they're living in a city where they normally go to Cleveland High School, they can go to Bradley to be involved in that program because he's got a program where they have their daily newscast. There's Fox News comes out every day, and it's shown on TV every day of the week. It's every school day. If
you want to be the audio video, that'd be where you go.
Well, they've won 4 straight state championships. I say that speaks pretty highly of what they can do. And the kids, it's a kids show. They produce it, direct it,
I've
write
seen
the
it.
news.
It looks professional.
It is. It is very professional, and that's a feather in the cap for Bradley for things like that. And there's a lot of good programs at Bradley like that.
Aren't we lucky to live in a county or city where we can do that?
Mm-hmm. A lot of schools don't have that. We've had kids, last year when I was subbing, I had a girl in class one day and was talking about her. She said, I drive to school. And I said, well, how far do you live? She said, I live in Sweetwater. I said, no, wait a minute. I said, you live in Sweetwater, Tennessee. I said, that's what, 50, 60 miles? I drive it every day. I said, why? She said, I like the school here. And I don't know if it's something else. She might have had a boyfriend for all I know, but she had kids from across the state line in Georgia a couple of times. In Whitfield County.
I remember when they got the...
a lot of kids from Polk County.
And that's understandable if they live this side of Polk County, but Sweetwater, that's bizarre.
That's a stretch to me.
That's bizarre.
Chattanooga, had kids from Chattanooga drive up here every day to go to Bradley. Didn't like the Hamilton County school system. My parents didn't. Parents didn't like it. Mm-hmm. And that's what they told me anyway, so I don't get... Now, there's not a lot of those. There's a handful.
Yeah.
But there's some, I just shake my head and wonder, why are they doing that?
Do you have kids in sports or do you have children? Or?
I've got two sons. I've got 3 grandkids now, a great-grandson. And my grandson, Hunter, who went to Polk County, he played basketball at Polk County over 4 years. My other boys didn't play sports, and I wasn't big enough to play sports when I was in school. But no, we've never. I always wished, that I had kids playing sports because.
Well, they could pick from 14.
They'd probably hate me because I'm so passionate about it. They wouldn't let me attend the games, I'd be.
What makes you passionate about it?
I don't know. I guess going back in the old days, getting up in the morning and listening to WBAC with Corky giving us scores and things like that, and then he's doing the games at night. So I just got hooked on Bradley. I guess Mama went to Bradley. My mother did, and my dad didn't he didn't get out of elementary school. That's the 3rd grade, I guess, is what it was. But I don't have any idea, honestly, of why. But I'm glad I am that way.
So you call the games, right?
Mm-hmm. Play.
Not referee.
No, Lord, no.
You're the commentator.
I'd like to referee a few games.
Yeah.
I've got.
You're the commentator.
Yeah.
Where do you sit?
Well, sit in the press box. Football, it's me and Earl, and Gwen's the sideline reporter for us at the Bradley football. Basketball, Steve Wills works with me for basketball, and we sit right there.
How do you know whose number? I mean, to watch it and say number 11 did this, but number 12 did that.
Well, you don't call them by number to start with. That's a cardinal sin. You call them by name.
Why is that?
Well, it sounds hokey. It's very unprofessional. Call them by number. You don't say number 5 shoots a shot and misses and 3 gets a rebound. You say Smith shoots and Brown gets a rebound, whoever it is. And
how do you know who it is? I mean, you have a
well,
list?
I've got a roster, and I know the Bradley kids or Cleveland kids or Walker Valley kids. I know them.
But
But the visiting
how could
teams,
you do that so quick?
well, it's not hard. I don't think. Not hard for me anyway. And I get the roster from the other school, for the game.
It's one thing to know the Bradley people, but to know their people.
Well, sometimes you forget, especially with the other team, you forget their name during the course which comes really heated real fast sometimes.
Well, you keep a
You
list
just say it's a
there that
shot
says
from
number, the
Well,
name.
I've got the roster with their name and number, and we give the introduction, starting lineups, and then Corky always told me, he says, if you can't remember the name, just use a color. I said, what do you mean a color? He said, well, use brown or white or black, or use that as their name. Just say Brown shoots in the corner. Then you can come back later on and remember his name, or look down and see what it was. Well, I was wrong. That was John Smith that shot that. It wasn't Brown. People would not know.
Well, they're not. That'd be
Did
hard
not
to
know
be
that.
listening anyway and say, oh, he had the wrong, unless you were the guy that did it.
Well, we've had some visiting fans that come with radios because they knew we'd broadcast, especially with Chattanooga. Chattanooga has no broadcasting for football or basketball. They do a game a week in football, I guess, but they don't do anything for basketball. And we've had people come from Chattanooga schools, especially with radios and listening in. And now it's on the internet. All of our home games are streamed live with audio and video. We're using our audio. But I've had a lady one time, and people don't believe me, I tell this, but I'm sitting in our broadcast, had a headset on, game's going on, and I get a tap on my shoulder. I look around, she says, that's not how you pronounce my son's name. I'm thinking, lady, I'm trying to do something here.
Yeah, can you wait till halftime?
Yeah, could you go back to your seat and get out of my face? But just crazy stuff like that.
Well, that would be understandable in the.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody calls.
Because there's some hard to pronounce names out there.
Oh, it'd be hard to pronounce them. Even my name, Burris, people call it all kinds of stuff.
And so when the first thing we do, like for basketball, is we go to the other team, their coach or assistant coach, okay, I see these weird names here. How do I pronounce it on the radio? And we might write out phonetically,
Yeah, so
so we can read it and have it correct on the radio.
Well, that's a lot of work.
Well, it is, but it's fun. But people think when you're doing a broadcast, a game, football or basketball, so they just go in and put the equipment out, hook it up, test it, turn it on, and start talking.
Yeah.
There's hours upon hours spent prior to games for me and Earl getting together the history of like Friday night we went to Maryville. I've got every score of every game we ever played. I can tell you how many points Maryville scores, how many points they give up.
Let's go through that rundown. What time does the game start?
Game starts at 7 o'clock kickoff. We go live at 5:30, an hour and a half.
Why early?
We've got pre-recorded, like with the coach, with a football panel, and with a player. And then Earl and I and Gwen, we talk just general, where we at, why are we here, what does this game mean, what's the significance of this game.
So we have like a 5 or 6 5-minute segments that you can play like you would a commercial or something. So
we have a player interview that usually runs about 8 to 10 minutes.
When did they start that?
They started about 6:20 if a 7th.
No, I mean, how many years ago?
Oh,
I don't
Lord,
remember them
shoot.
doing that.
Corky did that for many, many years, and I just picked up when Corky retired and kept doing it.
Was his audio recorded too?
It was just audio, not video. Now we go down to Brad to that studio I was telling you about, and we record it as a video, and it's put out on BCHS
How do you know which
TV.
ones you're going to interview?
Well, I get with a coach, and with football, like we start with the captains of the football team, get them first. Then we look at the seniors, and then we look at whoever else. The longer you go, like we did 12 interviews this year for 12 players. I interview the coach every single week. Talk about the game last week, the game coming up. And then we are also started last week with basketball, boys and girls coaches, interviewing those. And last year we did an interview with every coach at Bradley in every sport in their season. I'm doing one with wrestling Tuesday for Ben Smith, who's the wrestling coach. Wrestling starts in about 3 weeks. And then last year at Bradley we did one with the SRO, with the ladies over culinary, the lady who's over the cafeteria, the new assistant principals, and the librarian. I mean, we did the nurse. We interviewed about everybody up there that was moving.
So you start. You
hit different departments.
You go live at 5:30.
Yes.
So from 5:30 on, it's sort of automatic.
Well, it is to a point, but we switch back to the studio to do the pre-recorded stuff.
Yeah. So
And
you switch.
that gives us a chance to grab a bite to eat,
Get some
do
popcorn or
whatever we need to do, and then we come back live.
And when do you go to the
About 6
other
o'clock.
team and say, "Hey, how do you pronounce this? Is that a 7? Is that a 6?"
During that time frame of where
Somewhere
the
in
pre-recorded
the
stuff is
hour
running.
and a half.
Yeah. we've got time now. Like with Maryville, we'd seen them before this year, so we already knew about them.
But if you hadn't known them,
if they had hard to pronounce names, we'd have to go ask their announcers or their PA guy or somebody. Hey.
So does the other team have people doing the same thing y'all are?
Oh yeah.
Not exact, but their version of it.
Yep. They come to us, and when we're in the press box, like at Farragut was up there 2 weeks ago, and we get with their guys. You know, they're in the same press box. Here's our lineup. We go down and see if they need a copy of our lineup because we played them this year too, and we still got their lineup.
So you're in the same press box?
Yeah, in most cases. Now, Maryville we weren't. We were on separate sides of the field.
If you're calling a game, how far? If you're in the same press box,
usually there's a pretty good distance between us and them.
You can't hear them.
Well, sometimes we get a little excited and a little loud and rowdy, so we can hear the PA and we can hear their guys talking sometimes, and they can hear us. I know
you could just listen to what they're saying.
And Earl slamming on the table all the time and carrying on. They hear him pretty easily. But then we got coaches up there with us too. Our Bradley coaches are usually right near where we're at.
But you're talking to the person listening or watching the streaming.
Yes.
So you're not.
I'm
really,
on a headset.
In your mind, you're just one-on-one.
Yes.
In your mind.
I'm ignoring all the noise and cut out all the noise I can in the press box.
Wish I could do that at home.
Well, and it's not annoying, but it interrupts you if somebody comes up. Somebody who knows you, and you're on the air live, and you're trying to keep a train of thought. And somebody's trying to get your attention back here. I just wave at them.
In your mind, you're talking to the people that's listening to you.
Yeah, because if they're watching on video at home,
you
don't want to look like an idiot and call the wrong play or something like that. You want it to be professional about it and make the right call. Because people will say, man, I heard you describing that play and I was watching it. That's not what it sounded like or looked like to me,
You would have had no idea when you had a hobby of taking pictures of sports to learn more about the camera that you would end up being the Howard Cosell.
Please don't equate me with Howard Cosell. I mean, these people hate him.
Well, I mean, they're like a Corky Whitlock or whoever. Who is it that does it now for the? Because to me, that just seems like the hardest thing I could imagine doing.
It's not hard. I mean, it's not, like I said, it's not for everybody. Everybody thinks they can do it. I have a lot of young people say, help me get into broadcasting. How do I do that? Well, go home and practice with your TV turned off and see and record yourself. Record yourself and see how bad you sound. Mm-hmm. That'll shock you when you hear yourself for the first time, And I've had a lot of people. I had a story about Corky and I were broadcasting a game at Bradley, a basketball game, and before the game came on, before we went live, we were hooking up the equipment, and this guy walks up right in front of the press box or the scores table there where we're setting up, and he just stands there. And Corky's doing his thing, and I'm doing my thing, and I'm looking down, and I sort of see him out of the corner of my eye, and finally I look up, and I gesture like this, and he says, "Say something." I said, "What do you mean, say something?" "Oh, you're not Corky. That's got to be Corky." By the sound of the voice,
Yeah.
And I've had people, I had a guy just yesterday, I was over at a pizza place picking up pizza and standing there talking to some people there, and this guy comes, "You're Gary Ownbey." I said, "Yeah, do I know you?"
No.
"I recognize your voice." I'm thinking, my voice is, I don't have a good radio voice. I don't have a Corky Whitlock voice. I don't have a good radio voice. I tell you that. I know that. But I make it for passion and enthusiasm, just like Earl will tell you, We don't either one have a radio voice. Now, Gwen Schroyer, he's got that soft, warm, honey voice, I call it, like Corky had. Sounds good on the radio. Dwayne Williams is another one that's good on the radio, with his voice.
Yeah.
I know I'm not like that, but it's strange how many people. I said the same thing happened at Special Olympics last year. I was in the press box there, fixing to go on the air, and this guy walks in, and he's telling me how to do this and that. And I said, "Well, I think I know how to run this." He said, "Wait a minute, I know that voice. I know that voice. I know you're Gary. You're the Bradley radio guy." I said, "Yeah, I'm guilty, but it's crazy." But
do you just work? So all week you're doing getting these films ready and getting the.
Well, we record those on a Tuesday during the season, whatever season.
During the day.
In the day, yeah, in the studio there at Bradley. I set time aside.
What if you can't do it on Tuesday? Do you do it Wednesday?
Well, election day we couldn't do it. We did it Wednesday. So we had to buff it Wednesday.
The reason you do it don't do it Mondays is chaotic, and the reason you do it Tuesdays is because if you can't make it, you still got Wednesday and Thursday. Maybe.
Yeah, I guess that's one way to look at it. And see, it also goes out on YouTube, and it goes out on Facebook, it goes out on BCH TV, it goes to the stations on the station's Facebook. So there's a lot of people depending on us getting that done. And Gwen edits it for us there. I mean, we record the raw footage and the video and audio, and then he wraps around it with music and graphics and things of that nature. It makes it look real professional, so it works out really, really good. And other schools don't have the luxury of having a Gwen Schroyer to do the stuff that we do.
Well, they do.
Well, different ones do different things, and some don't do anything. But it's not. It just doesn't have the Bradley touch to it. Put it that way, I guess.
Which is going back to this book. Evidently, Bradley football has been a big thing.
Oh, it's huge.
Ever since then.
It's huge. You got 100 years of history there looking at you in the face, and Bradley it's 14 or 15 years old now, I guess, from 1916, when the Bradley that we know up there on Ocoee. And so you've got a long, long line of generations of people who went to Bradley, families, like mine, 4 generations of mine that went to Bradley and that support Bradley. And that helps to have that support because a lot of these people are business owners. And behind the scenes, it just takes a lot of money to make things happen, and it's good to have those connections when you need help in whatever. It may not be money, but hey, I need you to come in there and move this thing for me or something, whatever. But,
so going back to Maryville, you go online. You would go online at 5:30, an hour and a half before it starts, and so Maryville's what, an hour away?
Yeah, it's about 70 miles, something like that.
But so that's an hour.
Oh,
but you got to get set up. I'm sure you got to plug stuff in, right?
Well, the important part is we got to find a good place to eat. So we leave time to eat. Gwen can verify that, but we have some places that we've traveled enough. We know where we want to stop and eat. So
before 5:30.
We left Friday at 2:00. Game's at 7:00.
That almost doesn't leave enough time because you got to get there and plug stuff in.
We get there, take an hour to drive to Maryville. We allow 45 minutes or so to eat at a nice leisurely pace. We get to the school, and I've already contacted the AD, the athletic directors there at every school we go to. I don't care if it's across town to Cleveland High or to Walker Valley. Say, hey, we're coming over. It's a courtesy call. Say, hey, we're coming up. And they know we're coming. Make a courtesy call, and right now we ask them, is there any special requirements, protocols we got to keep in mind when we get there? So if we go live at 5:30, I want to be there an hour beforehand. I want to be there at 4:30. And generally we're there an hour before whenever we go live because we got to, like you say, plug in all the equipment. We got to do sound checks. We got to hook up the station either via hard line or by
extension cord maybe tore up or something.
Yes, you got to have all that with you because you drive to Maryville 70 miles and you ain't got nobody to fall back on if you're missing a piece of equipment. So if we go to the station, first thing at the station is to go through, take it all out of the box and make sure everything's in there that we need, for the electronic side to make it happen. And they'll tell us this so-and-so is going to be working the control board for you here at the studio tonight. So when we get there, we'll call them and say, hey, we're ready to check out and test things out here right now to make sure we're live and can go live. And
God, boy, that sounds like a lot of. And then
it's
so
just
people like me are just driving home and they turn on WCLE and the game's ready to start. We have no idea what all went into that.
No, and when we're doing the video, now like at Bradley for home games or even some road videos, it's an all-day thing for Mr. Schroyer and his kids to get the camera set up and get all the cables drug and strung out.
In the press box?
Yes. Not just in the press box, the cameras outside, like on the goal lines. So they got cables running all the way down.
If it's raining.
Hey.
Or drizzling.
That's tough. It's tough.
Because you don't know if the game's going to be called or not.
Oh, they don't call it off for rain or not football.
Yeah.
Unless it's a storm. Like we had one game this year moved from Friday to Thursday because that hurricane down there, not the newest one, but the one before that came in through Louisiana, was going to dump a lot of rain here on Friday and Saturday, they thought. So
high probability.
Moved our game to Thursday that night. That's the night the lights went out at Bradley at first quarter because Bradley's lights are on a timer out of Iowa. Now, why it's set up that way, I don't know. So they know Friday nights and late in the year.
I would have thought somebody just turned the light on.
Nope. They're controlled electronically on the computer out there, and they're turned on and turned off at midnight for a regular Friday night game at Bradley. Well, when we moved the game to Thursday, nobody thought to call and tell them that. So at 8 o'clock, the lights are turned off after practice. At 8 o'clock, they automatically go out. So in the first quarter, at exactly 8 o'clock, the lights go out on both sides. We're sitting there in darkness, except for the baseball lights that are on, giving you enough light to see. So a phone has to be made to those folks out there.
Is there somebody out there sitting?
I don't know. I guess there's somebody controlling it. That they have a way to communicate. Say, turn the lights back on. So you're waiting 20 minutes to get that to happen, though. So when the lights come on, they've got to warm up. They're not like incandescent lights. You turn a switch and they're on instantly.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought.
These are mercury vapor type lights that have to warm up, So that's another few minutes to get those on. But
I installed the lights at Bradley baseball field when Toby gave money. In fact, I did the whole fence and the dugout and the whole thing with Toby paid
well,
for it.
it's probably one of the best high school stadiums in the country, really.
That's because I built it.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Not
sure.
necessarily.
Well, I didn't know that. I'll give you a plug next time
Yeah,
it comes up. But
yeah,
can you put turf on the field at Bradley for us?
probably, if Toby were still here, we could.
That's the main thing. The stadium itself is fine. We need a bigger press box. But
Toby wanted to do that for Bradley baseball. He really wanted to do that. That was a big deal to him.
Did you ever see Toby play when he was in Little League in baseball?
No, but I tell you what, we were walking out through there one day and we were going to look at something, and he was hard to keep up with just walking. He has a long stride, very agile, and that wasn't too much earlier than when he died. So he was agile and had a long stride.
Yeah. When he was in the Little League, I've seen him a time or two, but they would walk him with the bases loaded rather than let him hit the ball. He was that good. Left-handed, and left-handed pitcher. Yeah. Nobody could hardly touch him. And he was just a good athlete, in baseball especially. But we missed Toby around here. He was a great community support, for everybody.
He was,
It wasn't just Bradley. He was helping everybody, Polk County and all the people around here. He had a soft heart for people in need.
Yeah, he really did. So this orchestration of this thing is a whole lot more massive than I would have ever dreamed.
You mean in regard
I thought you just walked up and started calling the game.
That's what a lot of people think, like I told you. But no, you could do that, I guess. But man, that's a lousy broadcast, if you ask me. And when you're on the air doing a game, basketball and football, you know when you've had a good broadcast. There's times when I walk away and say, man, that's probably one of the worst broadcasts I've ever had. I mean, I couldn't get words out right. I was calling the wrong plays or wrong players' names or whatever. But there's times when, man.
Does anybody notice? Would they notice?
Not unless it's the parents.
If it's not the parents, it just pass on by.
Well, no, and I'll ask people, how'd that sound, and it's station, they'll tell me, well, that's pretty good, well, you had some issues there that last broadcast.
So you get it 95% correct or whatever.
Yeah. Do the best you can, it's like anything. You're going to make mistakes, Show me a guy that don't make mistakes and show you a guy that don't do anything.
Especially when it's all rush. I mean, they're not going to slow the game down so you can catch up.
No, basketball really, it's just back and forth all the time. So that's where you really got to be on your toes.
Is it harder to call basketball?
Oh yeah. Football, you run a play and you got a few seconds between plays, to gather your thoughts or talk about what happened. And, he gained 5 yards. And that's first and second 5, whatever it is. Basketball, though, one team could score and the other team could throw the ball in and be back down the floor before the other teams even get down there, So
and miss it and be coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's tougher there, but you get used to doing that though. And like I said, I worked with Corky a lot, and I just listened to him and see how he handled that.
Was he really good at it?
He was, and he always said, never let them see you sweat. If we've got a problem, don't let them know about it. If it's a technical problem, I'll tell you a great story about basketball. Now, we were out of town at a tournament game. We were playing on a whole every night of the week. We had 4 games lined up for Friday night and 4 games lined up for Saturday. Well, Thursday night, the Bradley girls upset the home team there, and I'm not going to mention the school's name, don't need to. But we got a call that Friday. Corky got a call, said, you guys might want to come early. Says, some kids cut your phone lines. We had to use hard lines back then. This is in the late 90s. We was using hard lines, taking a dial phone, and that's how we communicate back to the station on the phone. Said, they cut your lines. So Corky calls me and said, can you get off from work early? I said, we might have to get up here early. And it's up the road up there, county above us. I'll tell you that much about it. And so we get up there, and sure enough, now there's 4 games going. We're doing the 3rd game. So there's a game in front of us going on, and this place is packed. And right there, we're up on this mezzanine. Below us, there's a concrete block wall, and there's a plug in there. There's a phone jack plug in there. And then some kids had pulled it out, cut it off, shoved it back in and put super glue in on top of that. Corky says, go down and see what that looks like. So I went down there and I said, a gentleman and his wife are sitting there. Daughter's playing basketball behind me. I'm facing the wall. They're facing the ball court watching their daughter play. And I said, I need to get right here. And I evaded them. They moved over though, And, what are you doing? I'm trying to squat down a little bit. I'm sitting on somebody's back behind me now because it's packed in here. And I looked at that and I looked at Corky and said, man, this, what are we going to do here? So we had some kind of screwdriver or something. So I went and got it, and I dug out of there. And this guy said, what are you doing? I said, I've got to get this phone line going for our broadcast. And
He thought you was crazy.
and I pulled it out there, and it's a 4-pair wiring. You know, it's got the pastel colors, and I'm colorblind. I can't tell pastel colors. So I got these. I'm peeling these wires back, and I'm looking at them like this. And this guy says, he's getting madder by the minute. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Somebody cut our line today, so that we couldn't broadcast tonight." They thought. I said, "I've got to get these all wired, tied back together here, so we can broadcast." Corky Whitlock is awake one. You know, tell me, we got to go here in just a few minutes because our game's going to tip off. The other game's about to end. And he said, "What do you mean somebody cut it?" I said, "Some kid here at school, they cut off." He said, "I'm going to help you all you need. I'll help you all you need. What do you need me to do?" I said, "Well, match these colors for me. I can't tell them." So we had 4-pair wiring, and all this looked like a spider web. Mm-hmm. And it just dangling, hanging there. I said, "Lord have mercy, we'll never last the whole night. Somebody's going to knock it." He said, "No, I'm going to sit right here, and my wife's going to sit here all night long. Nobody's going to touch it."
And was he from the opposing team?
Yeah, where the kid did it.
Yeah.
He said, "I apologize." He said, that is low class on their part. He said, "I hate that happens." He said, "Don't worry about that." Mm-hmm. And so we got back together, and I looked at Corky. I said, and he said, "We got a dial tone." So we knew it was good then. And that guy sat there the whole night long. He did. That's one of the craziest stories we've ever had.
Nice of the guy, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And I said, man, I went back again later and
I
thanked him for doing that. But it was just one of those crazy things. Kids do crazy things, you know. But that's one of the funniest things that ever happened. It wasn't funny at the time. But I was furious about it. When we got ready to go in there, I said, I want to blast somebody over the air. He said, "You're not going to say a word about this. Not one word. We're going to come on time, and we're fine. They don't need to see that. If you start talking like that, then they've won. You know, don't let them win."
Was that what Corky was like in real life?
He never had a bad word to say about anybody that I ever heard in my life. The worst thing I ever heard him call it, somebody was burrhead. You know, if somebody aggravated him, he's, "Well, here comes old burrhead again," you know, and what does he want this time, you know. But that's never ever any inkling of profanity or anything like that. Never heard anybody or him say anything bad about anybody. And by the same token, I never heard anybody say anything bad about him because he was a gentleman and a Christian from the word go, and he lived that life. And he's still with us, you know. He's had some strokes. He can't talk now, but he's still alive and very healthy.
He can't talk at all?
No, he can't talk. And that's ironic that someone talked for their living has lost their voice. You know, he understands. I've visited with him, and I can't right now because of COVID, but he understands everything you're saying, and he can sit and laugh and cry with it, and he loves to reminisce about old times, talk about, "Hey, you remember when this happened, like the story I told you there about the wiring and all that?" Yeah. He can't say yeah. He'll just shake his head. And
he was always the announcer at the baseball games at Fulbright when I played baseball there.
He's announced about everything. I think he did 17 or 18 state championship finals in basketball and football and baseball. If you count Brad and Cleveland. He didn't ever do one for Walker Valley because they've never gotten that far. But he did some games of theirs when they became a school. We did several games for Walker Valley. I do every year. And but he did a lot of Cleveland basketball and football, and Bradley basketball and football. Well, he did all of those. So he's probably had. Well, when we were trying to get him into the TSS State Hall of Fame, and we never did, haven't yet. And I had to write his bio and all his information and send over there to the people that handle that. They've got this anonymous committee. They won't tell you who's on the committee, so you don't know who to send it to. You just send it to the TSSAA, to one of the executives over there, and they said, "We'll handle it from this point on." Well, we submitted it 3 times, and he's never been honored with that yet. He should be. It's a disgrace. But they told me then he's the longest tenured announcer they've had in the history of Tennessee high school sports.
Why wouldn't they give it to him? I mean,
well, they've got favors over there for people, secretaries and people like that. It's a community service award. That'd be the category he would go in, not as a coach.
And this is where are these people at?
Over in Lebanon, Tennessee. Oh. They're overall high school sports, but they thought that some of the people who had worked there and were going to retire, worked there 20 or 30 years, were more important than someone who'd given their life to that. You know, which is crying shame and disgrace.
Somebody needs to pull some strings.
Well, whose strings you pull, they don't know who the committee is. But I hope he'll get there before he passes away. But I hope he's with us a lot longer too. But
how old would he be now?
He's approaching his late 70s. Or I don't think he's not 80, but he's in his late 70s.
So I would have been playing baseball at Fulbright at 13, 14 years old, I guess.
He came here in '61.
Where was he from?
He was from over Smith County, DeKalb, Smith County over in Middle Tennessee.
Close to Lebanon, I guess, right?
Well, it's the other side of Cumberland County, it's south of Nashville, I guess. in Nashville to go south and
Yeah.
get there, I guess. But he went to broadcasting school. People don't know, but he went to broadcasting school in Middle Tennessee. And one of the guys that was instructor was the Georgia announcer for so long, who passed away now. I can't think of his name. But that was one of his instructors. And he went to Florida, down in the panhandle of Florida, in a little bitty town down there. I can't think of the name of that either, but he on a radio station, just a young guy. Mm-hmm. That's where he met his wife. She was playing basketball, high school basketball down there, Annette. That's how they met. And he said, I had eyes for her real quick like, you know. And he was working for a little old radio station there, covering some games and stuff and all that, and that's how they met. They've been married, 60 years, I guess, now. But
does he live in Cleveland?
Here now?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Whereabouts?
Lives over here off of Georgetown on Steed Road, Steed Street.
Steed Street.
Yeah, right there near 17th Street over there.
You know, looking back, he would have been younger than me at the time he was a radio announcer for Fulbright.
He was just a kid. I'll tell you, he was just a kid, didn't know what he's doing.
I thought he was an old man then.
But he had that voice. He always had that voice.
And black hair.
Yep.
I remember it was really black hair.
Yep. Sure was.
Why I remember that, I don't know.
He was a little, not quirky, but he was routine, set this way, so he knew what he wanted to do and how it was going to be done. And we did it Corky's way. And I guess I'm stubborn and routine in a lot of the ways.
Was he very meticulous on timing and stuff?
Well, you have to be. And see, when he did his morning show, he did the morning drive DJ show for years and years and years, up till he retired. Mm-hmm. He did every morning, and he lived his by the stopwatch, by the seconds. He'd tell you, his whole job was based on the seconds.
Boy, I'd get old.
And he said, I'd have people come in here, and he sits at a control board, and he had a mic that come down. It wasn't a headset. He had a mic that come down off of a thing there. And he said, I'd have people come in. I'd interview people because he'd talk back and forth. He said, I'd never turn around and even see them, see what they look like. He said, I'd do the full interview, and they'd get them walk out, and I'd never see who they were. I had their name, and I knew what question I want to talk about, like a farm view or whatever.
It'd be like brushing your teeth left-handed.
Well, hey, I'm left-handed. So
yeah, or right-handed for you.
But
so when, like on this Maryville game, what time would you get back? Because when you get through, do you have to do any interviews?
We have post-game shows.
So the game would get over what?
And then we got to stop at
10 o'clock.
Yeah, we got to stop again on the way home, get something to eat. We're hungry again by now because they can't serve you food now.
And you got to load everything up.
Oh yeah, break it down and put it all back together the right way.
And bring it back to Bradley High, or do you just wait till the next
station? Back to the station.
Oh, so you can't wait on Monday.
Well, sometimes we can, but a lot of times they have remote on Saturday, and then we've got a limited amount of equipment. We got 3 stations now.
Oh, so if they were going to be at
car dealership
the next morning, Dwayne would get mad if he went over there and it wasn't there.
So it always goes back that night. But there's times when I've told him, we go to Kingsport. We had a game at Kingsport about 4 years ago. It got delayed by a lightning storm. It was an early season game, lightning storm. Delayed. We didn't kick off to 8:30. It's 7:30 kickoff. We didn't kick off to 8:30. It was 3:30 before we got home that night. We had left at noon that day going up there because that's a 3-hour drive, 190 miles one way to get there. And we had to stop and eat going up and coming back. So with the delay and all, it was 3:30 we got home.
Boy.
In the morning. That's a long haul.
But this is a labor of love for you.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
These 2 books is...
You don't do it for the money. We get paid a little bit, but it's not. We don't do it for the money. We do it because we love doing it and being around the kids. It's like when I sub at Bradley a lot, and being around those kids, it keeps you feeling young, I guess, or at least acting young sometimes. But I enjoy being around the kids. And by doing the radio, you really get to know the players because we're interviewing the players after the game a lot of times.
That's what I mean.
Interviewing them, you get to know them on a personal level.
Yeah, you got to wait till they come up there, I guess.
Yeah. Well, like at basketball, we'll have somebody who has a really good basketball game, boys and girls, and we'll tell the coach, okay, when you're through after the post-game meeting you have and talk to them, send so-and-so out to talk with us. And we'll interview them, between games or after the game's over. Football, we have a player of the game on the field. A lot of times Gwen Sroyer, who's our sideline guy, will interview them on the field. Sometimes they come to the press box. We always like to try to do a coach's interview post-game. So, yeah, if you go to Maryville, the game may be over at 10 o'clock. We're at least 30, 45 minutes before we even leave the press box, probably every single game. That's just part of it. But it's fun to do. It's the kind of thing a lot of people would like to do. But you want to do it right.
I'm glad that you're doing it instead of me.
Well, it's something that you love to do. I mean, if you didn't like it, you couldn't do it.
Well, your name has certainly, like I say, you are here by popular demand, and even though I'm not much into basketball or football, I can see that you're very passionate about it.
Yes, I am. I think that adds to the broadcast. People know that, and people know.
So where can you get your book?
Well, they can contact me. I'm not going.
How can you be contacted?
I'll leave my cell number. We'll let them put it on the graphics for your show if you want to.
Okay, yeah.
Not my cell number,
Yeah.
my email address. I'm not giving out my cell
Yeah.
number. I'll give them out yours, but not mine.
I
But I
won't
can do
answer.
that, and they want to contact me that way. Like I said, I may have one or two basketball books. I don't know if we'll do a reprint or not on that. Football, I've got several of those left, so they.
Is this at the Cleveland Public Library?
Yes, it is. It is. They have multiple
So
copies.
so
of it.
after being there and writing, do you ever walk by it and see it on the shelf and say, "Boy, I'm glad I'm done with that"?
Yep. But they've told me there that a lot of people come in looking for that book because they know it's there. And it's one of those you can't take home. You know, it's in the reference section, so you can't take it home.
It doesn't have a thing in the back.
No, it's in there. It's in the reference section. They can't take it home. But there's a lot of people coming. Matter of fact, they've called me and says we need more copies. Says the book's worn out. People have.
So you're about going to have to do another batch.
Well, I don't know. We might have to. If I do another batch, so I'd like to update it. See, this ended in 2015. I'd like to update it because we've got a state championship now to talk about. And I was working on a third book. Well, when COVID hit, I couldn't go interview people. It was instead of just crunching numbers like this was, it was going to be more intimate with people, one-on-one interviews with people like Steve Sloan, like Bob Johnson, like Karen Mills, like people who played basketball for us, and things like that. And I had a lot of interviews done, and I've got them at home. I recorded them, and I've got them put in a narrative form already. But boy, if they came to a screeching halt, then nobody wanted me to come to them anyway, and I didn't want to go to them.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people I'm talking to are older people too, from the days gone by, and that's the people I really want to get because they're not going to be with us forever.
No, and you need to capture their thoughts.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
And like Doyle Palmer, that just passed away.
Yeah,
I had
Doyle
a
Palmer.
great interview with him this summer, and thank goodness I did.
Boy, thank goodness.
Who knew what happened? Because people don't realize the history that Doyle brings to our program, from
he
coaching
was
as
my,
a student. And
he was my first baseball coach.
he was a great coach, basketball and baseball, and he helped up Bradley in several different sports. He came to Bradley as a track and field coach. That's what got him to Bradley from North Lee, where he was coaching up there.
He always wore his hat real on top of his head.
Yeah.
He didn't pull it down. He just
And Mo trucker hats, we call
Oh,
it.
trucker hats,
hat,
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
But-
Gary, it's been nice, buddy.
Hey,
I
I've
see
enjoyed it,
now why
reminiscing.
you're so popular.
Well, that's good. That's good. I appreciate that. But
You have anything you want to announce or share? Or
no, we're going to have basketball. We're going to be on radio basketball coming up here in a few days, and then we'll move right into the wrestling season. Now, we don't broadcast wrestling. Our football season ended a few days ago, unfortunately.
maybe wrestling needs to be next.
Corky actually did a broadcast of wrestling one time. He didn't know squat about wrestling, but he had a color guy with him who knew all about wrestling. And they just did the one broadcast. I believe it's a Bradley-Cleveland match, which is, you got to go through this
You ought to
town
get
win
Alan
that.
Jones to fund you to write a book about wrestling.
Well, he's asked me about it a time or two.
We'll tell him to pay up and you'll do it.
Well, yeah, I could charge him an exorbitant rate, couldn't I?
Sure.
Make me feel better about
He'd
it.
pay it.
Yeah, he probably would.
Gary, I've enjoyed it.
I have too.